A K-9 German Shepherd jumped into the lake. What he was trying to reach will break your heart. He was known as the most disciplined K-9 officer in the county. Sharp, loyal, unstoppable. But when this German Shepherd suddenly broke protocol and leapt into a freezing lake during a routine patrol, everyone thought it was a fatal mistake. What he was trying to reach, however, left seasoned rescuers in tears. This story will change the way you see courage, loyalty, and what it truly means to protect. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more powerful and inspiring stories like this one straight to you. The morning began like any other for Officer James J.T. Teller. The skies over St. Cloud, Minnesota, were cloudy and calm, and the snow from the previous night still frosted the ground, giving the woods and lakeside a dull silver sheen. J.T. sat in his patrol SUV, sipping lukewarm gas station coffee, watching his partner through the windshield. Ranger, the department's most decorated K-9, was circling a tree near the lake, nose close to the frozen soil. His lean black and tan figure moved with quiet precision. He was 7 years old, a seasoned German Shepherd trained in search and rescue and narcotics, but lately his behavior had changed. He was distracted. It started a few weeks ago. Ranger would ignore commands he used to follow instantly. His focus drifted. During drills, he'd pause and stare off into the distance as if something unseen was calling him. The trainers blamed age. Others whispered burnout. But JT knew better. Ranger wasn't just a tool. He was a partner. And partners knew when something was wrong. JT stepped out of the cruiser. The wind hit him hard, cold and sharp, and he zipped up his jacket. Ranger, heel. The dog looked up immediately, ears alert, and trotted over. JT crouched, brushing a gloved hand down Ranger's thick neck. You good, boy. Ranger nudged JT's chest with his snout, then sat. JT smiled. You're just messing with me, huh? They were on routine patrol, assigned to the lakeside perimeter that bordered 3 counties. A child had gone missing 2 nights ago from a campsite nearby. They'd already searched for 48 hours, and things were turning grim. Hypothermia, if not worse. Ranger had found a scent trail earlier that morning, but something had pulled him toward the waterline. And that's where it got strange. They reached the lake's edge just after 10 a.m. JT scanned the icy surface. The lake was half frozen, with jagged shells of ice hugging the shoreline. Open water moved sluggishly beneath. He looked back at Ranger. The dog stood still, ears up, body trembling, not from cold, but from something deeper. And then he jumped. No warning, no bark. Ranger launched himself into the frigid lake, crashing through a weak patch of ice with a loud crack. Ranger, JT's heart stopped. He rushed forward, slipping on the bank, grabbing at the ice with his boots. He could see the splash zone, bubbles rising where Ranger had gone under. Panic surged through his veins. Ranger, come back. Then he saw it, a flash of brown and black. Ranger's powerful legs kicked against the water, driving him through the freezing current toward a small object floating a few yards ahead, barely visible. JT squinted. It looked like the sleeve? JT grabbed the radio from his shoulder. Dispatch, Officer Teller. My K-9 has entered Lake Raymond. Possible visual on the missing child. I need backup and rescue support now. Static. Then, copy that, Officer Teller. Sending fire and rescue. ETA 8 minutes. But JT knew it could be too late. The water was near freezing. Even for a trained dog, hypothermia would set in fast. He ran along the edge, keeping pace with Ranger. The dog was fighting against the current, jaws clenched, never once turning back. Come on, boy, JT whispered. Please, come on. Then, just before Ranger reached the object, it shifted, revealing what it truly was. A child, floating face up, unmoving. JT's breath caught. It was a missing boy, Nathan Riggins, age 6. His jacket was torn, one glove missing, lips blue, hair plastered to his forehead, and Ranger was going straight for him. JT nearly jumped into the lake himself, but he couldn't risk losing both of them. He knelt by the bank, shouting encouragement. Get him, Ranger. You've got him. Ranger reached the boy, circled once, and then did something no one had ever trained him to do. He placed his front paws under the boy's shoulders and gently lifted his chin to keep Nathan's face above the water. Then he began swimming backward, pulling the boy with him. JT waded knee-deep into the lake. "Come on, buddy. You're almost there." Ranger's eyes locked with his muscles strained. His whines were short and sharp, a mix of pain and determination. But he didn't let go. When they reached the edge, JT grabbed the boy and pulled him up on the bank. He stripped off his jacket and wrapped it around Nathan's frozen body. No pulse, no breath. He immediately began CPR. "Come on, kid. Come on. Don't do this." Ranger collapsed beside them, shaking violently. His fur was soaked. He tried to rise, legs slipping, then collapsed again. JT wanted to comfort him, but the boy came first. "Nathan!" he shouted, pressing again. "Breathe." And then a cough, a shallow wheeze. The boy's body spasmed once, then again. Ranger let out a sound unlike anything JT had ever heard. Not a bark, not a growl, a low, shaking whimper that sounded relieved. The ambulance arrived moments later. JT carried the boy himself. Paramedics took over, and one of them turned to JT with a stunned expression. "He has a chance. That dog, he saved him." JT looked back at Ranger, who lay in the snow, eyes half closed, chest heaving. He ran to him, kneeling beside his partner. "You did it," JT whispered, his voice cracking. "You found him. You saved him." Ranger nudged his hand, and then he closed his eyes. The sound of beeping machines and sterile whispers filled the small veterinary ICU room at the St. Cloud Emergency Animal Hospital. But JT didn't hear any of it. He was sitting beside Ranger's table, both hands gripping the edge of the metal frame, eyes locked on the motionless German shepherd that lay wrapped in thermal blankets, with 4 tubes running from both front legs. His core temp dropped below 86. The vet had said earlier, frankly, he shouldn't have made it out of that lake. But he had, because Ranger wasn't just any dog. He was JT's dog, and he was a hero. Now, 6 hours had passed. Ranger hadn't moved. JT leaned in, brushing the damp fur along the dog's cheek. "They're calling you a legend, buddy," he whispered. "You should hear what they're saying. That boy's alive because of you." Ranger's breathing was shallow, the kind of rhythm that made you hold your own breath just to count the next one. JT didn't leave his side, not for food, not for sleep, not even when the hospital staff tried to gently encourage him. "You need rest," one of the techs said kindly. "He'll need time to warm up, but his vitals are stabilizing." JT shook his head. "I'm not going anywhere." They let him stay. Meanwhile, outside that room, the story had already gone national. Footage of the rescue had been taken by a body cam and released by the department with JT's permission. It showed the moment Ranger leapt into the water, the struggle against the current, and the final image of him pulling Nathan towards shore with a grip forged by instinct and loyalty. America fell in love. Social media called Ranger a warrior. News anchors cried on air. Children drew pictures of him and posted them to the precinct's mailbox. One school in Texas even held a Ranger Day and wore K9 ears made from felt. But Ranger didn't know any of that because he still wasn't waking up. JT sighed and rested his forehead against the edge of the table. "Come on, man. You've been through worse. Remember the warehouse fire in Duluth? You limped out of there and stole my sandwich 5 minutes later. I know you're still in there." He looked up, blinking back emotion. "Please don't leave me now." The door opened softly behind him. JT turned to see a woman in her late 30s standing there with a boy in her arms. She had wet eyes and wind-tangled hair. The boy was bundled in a heavy coat and scarf, but JT recognized him instantly. Nathan, the boy Ranger had saved. "Can we come in?" the woman asked. JT nodded, unsure what to say. She stepped closer. "I'm Angela, Nathan's mom." He stood and shook her hand. "Officer JT Teller." She looked at Ranger with trembling lips. "They told me, I watched the footage. I don't understand how he knew." JT shook his head. "I don't either, but he did." Angela turned to her son. Do you want to say thank you? Nathan looked up shyly, then down at the dog. He stepped forward, pulled his glove off slowly, and touched Ranger's paw. Thank you, he said, voice small. Ranger's ear twitched. JT sat up straight. Angela noticed too. Did he just... Ranger? JT leaned in. You hear that, buddy? That's the kid you saved. Ranger stirred again, this time shifting his paw slightly. And then his eyes opened. JT choked on his breath. Oh my God, Ranger. Ranger, it's okay. You're safe. The dog's eyes were groggy, unfocused, but they searched the room. He tried to lift his head and failed, whining weakly. Nathan moved closer. He's a good dog. JT laughed through tears. Yeah, kid, he's the best. Angela wiped her face. I just wanted to thank you. There's nothing I can say. Just thank you. JT nodded, unable to speak. She and Nathan left quietly, giving them space. When the door shut, JT turned back to Ranger. You scared the hell out of me, he whispered. But you did it. You brought him back. Ranger blinked once. Then, slowly, he pushed his head into JT's hand. It was the first sign of real strength. Over the next 48 hours, Ranger improved quickly. The hospital released him under strict monitoring, with anti-inflammatory meds, warm therapy, and mandatory rest. But Ranger had other plans. Back at JT's house, a small, worn-down place on the edge of town, they fell into a rhythm neither had known before. There were no drills, no calls, no barking commands. Just healing, just quiet. For the first time in years, JT didn't wear the badge when he woke up. He made eggs, let Ranger sleep on the couch, watched him breathe. The department called. Several times. JT didn't answer. The sheriff stopped by and left a medal at the door. But JT was thinking, not just about Ranger, about himself. He'd spent the last 15 years serving the badge, the rules, the job. But in all that time, he'd never really seen his dog for what he was. A partner, yes, but more than that, a soul. Ranger had chosen that boy, without orders, without hesitation. He had jumped because he felt something JT didn't, a need to say what no one else could see. One night, as snow drifted down outside and the fire crackled on the hearth, JT sat on the floor beside Ranger and said quietly, Maybe you didn't just save him. Maybe you saved me, too. Ranger looked up, rested his head on JT's lap, and sighed. For the next week, Ranger's name spread like wildfire. The rescue footage had gone viral. Local news stations broadcast it on repeat, and within days, national outlets picked it up. Interviews were requested. Brands offered sponsorships. Even the governor's office wanted a photo op Ranger. The once quiet legend of the K-9 unit was now a national hero. But fame was the last thing JT Teller wanted. Every time a news van parked near his house, he closed the curtains. Every time a reporter knocked on his door, he muttered, Not today, and focused instead on the German Shepherd lying by the fire. Ranger was recovering fast. His fur had regained its shine, and the tremors in his legs had subsided. But he wasn't the same, not entirely. He was calmer, softer, as though the lake had taken a piece of him and left something deeper behind. His eyes seemed wiser now, filled with something JT couldn't quite name. It was late afternoon when the phone rang. Officer Teller? It was Sheriff Daniels. His voice carried both concern and urgency. We need to talk. There's been a situation. JT straightened in his chair. What kind of situation? Animal Control filed a complaint, Daniels said, hesitating. They're saying Ranger's actions during the rescue violated multiple protocols. Apparently, someone's claiming he was off-leash and unsupervised at the time of the jump. They're demanding an inquiry. JT froze. What? Are you kidding me? He saved a child's life. I know, Daniel sighed, but you know how politics work. Someone up the chain is worried about liability. They're questioning whether Ranger is still fit for active duty after what happened. JT's knuckles whitened around the phone. So they want to punish him? For being a hero? Daniels lowered his voice. Meet me at the station tomorrow morning. We'll sort this out. After he hung up, JT sat for a long time, staring at Ranger. The dog was dozing on the rug, one paw twitching in his sleep. No idea that a storm was brewing around him. JT reached down, rubbing behind Ranger's ears. "They don't get it, do they?" he murmured. "They don't see what you did. What you always do." Ranger shifted and pressed his head against JT's hand. "Don't worry," JT whispered. "I've got your back." The next morning, JT and Ranger walked into the precinct together. The moment they entered, conversation stopped. Officers turned and nodded with quiet respect. Some clapped on JT's back. A few bent down to scratch Ranger behind the ears. "You're looking good, hero," one of the younger deputies said with a grin. But when JT reached the conference room, the atmosphere shifted. Sheriff Daniels sat at the head of the table, flanked by two representatives from the county's Animal Control Department and a stiff-looking lawyer from the city council. "Officer Teller," Daniels said, gesturing to his seat. "Please sit." JT sat, Ranger at his side. One of the animal control reps, a thin man with wire glasses, spoke first. "We've reviewed the footage from the rescue. While commendable, it appears that Ranger acted outside of standard K-9 procedures. He was not equipped with a safety harness or backup tether, and he entered hazardous conditions without handler clearance." JT's jaw clenched. He wasn't ordered. He knew. He saved that boy before I could even react. "That's precisely the issue," the lawyer cut in. "Your K-9 acted on instinct rather than command. In a legal sense, that makes the department vulnerable to lawsuits if something had gone wrong." JT leaned forward. "So what, you want to retire him? Because he's too smart? Because he doesn't wait for me to tell him every breath he should take?" The room fell silent. Daniel sighed. "No one's retiring anyone, but they want a full psychological and behavioral evaluation before he's cleared for active duty." "Fine," JT said through gritted teeth. "We'll do it. But know this. If Ranger walks away from this, it's not because he's broken. It's because he's better than the rules you made." That afternoon, JT drove Ranger to the evaluation facility, a bland building on the outskirts of town. The trainer, Dr. Emily Carter, was a respected canine behaviorist with a calm voice and sharp eyes. She met them in the training field, clipboard in hand. "So this is a famous Ranger," she said with a small smile, kneeling to his level. Ranger sniffed her hand and sat politely. "Before we begin," she said, "you should know I don't care about headlines or politics. I just want to know if he's happy." JT relaxed slightly. "That makes two of us." The evaluation took hours. Ranger was tested for response times, obedience, stress triggers, and cognitive memory tasks. He aced nearly everything. But something unexpected happened during the last test. A simple exercise where Ranger was supposed to retrieve a dummy object from a shallow pool. He froze. JT frowned. "What's wrong, buddy?" Ranger stared at the water, body tense. His tail lowered. "He's associating the pool with trauma," Dr. Carter said gently. "That lake event was intense. He may need time before he approaches water again." JT knelt beside him. "Hey, it's okay. You don't have to." Ranger looked up, eyes soft. For the first time, JT saw it. Fear. Not of water, but of failing. That night, back at the house, JT sat by the fire with Ranger curled beside him. "You've always been the brave one," JT murmured. "But maybe this time, I need to be the strong one for you." Ranger rested his head on JT's knee. Days passed. JT trained Ranger at home, not pushing him, just rebuilding trust. They went on quiet walks along the woods. They practiced commands in the yard. JT spoke to him constantly, praising every small success. But the news didn't stop. The inquiry was still ongoing. Some people online even began questioning whether Ranger's jump had been reckless. Trolls commented that a dog shouldn't make split-second decisions, that it was all luck, not heroics. JT didn't care about strangers, but he cared about what this was doing to Ranger. One night, JT found himself lying awake, staring at the ceiling. "Maybe this isn't about the badge anymore," he whispered into the dark. "Maybe we've done enough for them. Maybe it's time we do something for us." As if sensing his thoughts, Ranger climbed onto bed, curling beside him. JT smiled, resting a hand on his partner's chest. "Whatever happens, we're in this together." Outside, The wind howled across the frozen lake, and for the first time, JT wondered if their future lay beyond the force. The call came at 3:17 a.m. JT was barely asleep when the radio buzzed on his nightstand. He groaned, reached for it, and muttered, "Tell her here." A panicked voice came through. "JT, it's Deputy Morales. We got a situation, barn fire, outskirts of Oak Ridge. There's a woman trapped inside, and she's not alone. She's got a service dog with her. Won't leave without it." JT sat up instantly. "On my way." He turned and looked at Ranger, already sitting up beside the bed, eyes wide, alert. "You ready?" JT asked. Ranger gave a soft bark, just once. They were both ready. JT hadn't been called into active duty in weeks, not since the inquiry began. But this wasn't about protocol. It was about people, and animals, and fire. He tossed on his gear, slid a patrol jacket over his flannel, and within 5 minutes, they were tearing down the icy backroads toward Oak Ridge, lights flashing through the mist. When they arrived, the flames were already high. A red barn stood engulfed in orange, smoke curling into the night sky like a creature trying to swallow everything. Firefighters were battling to contain it, but the wind was cruel and fast. And standing outside, hysterical and wrapped in a blanket, was a woman screaming, "Don't go in there. He won't come without Daisy." JT jumped from the SUV. "What's happening?" he asked the nearest firefighter. "She got out, but the service dog won't come. It's deaf, trained only to respond to scent and hand signals. It's hiding in the south corner." JT didn't wait. He turned to Ranger, already standing at his side, body trembling, not from fear but anticipation. "You think you can help her?" JT said, looking into those sharp amber eyes. "One more time." Ranger barked once. The firefighter hesitated. "Wait, you're not cleared for her." But JT was already moving. Helmet on, mask strapped, Ranger at his side. They rushed toward the crumbling barn door, the heat intense even from 10 feet away. JT kicked through the half-burned entrance, shielding his face with his arm. Inside, it was chaos. Wood cracked and groaned as flames licked the rafters. The smell of burning hay, oil, and wood was suffocating. But Ranger didn't flinch. He dropped low, nose to the ground. JT followed, crouched, scanning for signs of movement. "Come on, buddy, find her." Ranger veered left, then froze. He looked toward a corner near a collapsed feeding trough and bolted. JT followed, heart pounding. There, tucked behind a wooden beam, was a trembling golden retriever wearing a red service harness. Smoke choked the air around her, and she was frozen in fear, tail curled tight. "Daisy," JT called. She didn't move. Deaf. But Ranger stepped forward. He circled her once, then nudged her side. She jerked, startled, but then seemed to recognize the scent. Ranger gently guided her forward, nose to shoulder. The flames were closer now. JT coughed. "We've got to go." Ranger nudged Daisy again, pushing her forward. Slowly, she began to follow. They moved as fast as the animals could go, around fallen beams, past searing heat, Ranger barking to keep Daisy focused. Halfway through, the ceiling groaned. JT looked up. "Move." A beam snapped and crashed to the ground, cutting off the main path. JT cursed. The doorway was gone. He turned left toward a side stall. They're small, narrow, but maybe passable. "Go, Ranger. Get her out." Ranger ran, Daisy behind him. JT stayed close until the smoke thickened. He stumbled, dropped to a knee. "Not now," he gasped. "Not now." A shadow moved beside him. Ranger. He had come back. He barked once hard and bit the back of JT's jacket, pulling. JT staggered to his feet, leaning on the dog's body. They burst through the side exit just as the roof collapsed behind them in a deafening roar. Firefighters rushed forward, pulling them to safety. One of them caught Daisy and carried her to her handler. JT collapsed to his knees, coughing violently, eyes burning. Ranger stood over him, panting, tail down but alert. "You stupid loyal mutt," JT wheezed, tears in his eyes. The woman ran toward Daisy, sobbing. "You saved her. You saved both of them." JT barely registered it. He was hugging Ranger, holding him like a child. Back at the precinct, the event had already sparked outrage and admiration. Photos of JT and Ranger walking out of the blaze hit social media by dawn. But unlike last time, the conversation had changed. Now, even the critics were silent. The sheriff called JT that afternoon. "We're dropping the inquiry." JT was stunned. "What?" "City Council just voted to make Ranger a departmental ambassador. They've offered him full retirement honors. Or you can keep working with him under a new designation, Guardian Unit. You two decide your own calls." JT turned to Ranger, lying by the fire with a fresh bandage on his leg. "What do you think?" he asked softly. Ranger blinked, then let out a low bark. JT laughed. "Yeah, that's what I thought." That night, JT stood outside in the snow, looking out over Lake Raymond, the same lake Ranger had jumped into just weeks before. "I used to think being a cop meant following rules," JT said into the stillness. "That loyalty came from doing the job." He turned to see Ranger behind him, tail wagging gently. "But you showed me that sometimes the job comes second." Ranger walked forward, pressing his head into JT's thigh. "I don't know where the story ends," JT whispered, "but I'm glad I get to keep writing it with you." Above them, snow fell quietly. And in the stillness of night, the bond between man and dog had never been stronger. Spring came slowly to Minnesota that year. After the barn fire rescue, JT and Ranger became local legends. The precinct created a plaque in their honor. A children's book was published. Letters arrived from all over the country. Kids writing to Ranger, veterans calling him a symbol of resilience. But amidst all the attention, Ranger remained humble, quiet, watchful, just like he always was. JT knew something had shifted. Not in the public. In Ranger, he still followed commands, still played fetch, still wagged his tail at the sight of snow. But sometimes, JT would catch him staring toward Lake Raymond, toward the place he had jumped without hesitation. And JT began to wonder, was there more to that jump than just instinct? One day, while sorting boxes in the precinct's K-9 archive room, JT found something that stopped his breath cold. A report, faded, 10 years old. K-9 assigned, Ranger. Handler, Officer Kyle Barrett. Status, retired. JT sat down slowly. He had never heard of this. According to the file, Ranger had been previously assigned, years before JT ever knew him. His original handler, Kyle Barrett, had drowned during a failed search and rescue in the very same lake, Lake Raymond. The report described how Ranger had jumped into the water to try and save his first handler, but had been pulled back by the team. He had refused to leave the shore for days after. JT stared at the page, heart thudding. Ranger hadn't just jumped that day to save Nathan. He had returned to the one place that haunted him. He had tried again, to do what he couldn't do the first time. "God," JT whispered, eyes burning. "You were trying to bring him back." He rushed home. Ranger was napping near the window, sunlight warming his fur. JT knelt beside him and held his face gently. "You were chasing a ghost, weren't you?" Ranger blinked slowly. JT pressed his forehead to the dog's. "And you finally saved someone this time." The next day, JT visited Barrett's grave. He brought flowers. And Ranger. They stood in silence for a long time. JT didn't speak. He didn't have to. Ranger lay down beside the grave. And for the first time, JT saw his partner at peace. That evening, JT made a decision. They were done with active service. No more politics. No more rescues. It was time Ranger lived a life he had earned. He bought a small piece of land by the lake, Ranger's Lake, built a cabin, left the city behind. Each morning, they walked the shoreline. And one afternoon, as the sun set low and golden across the water, a boy came running down the hill, Nathan Riggins, now stronger, older, and laughing freely. "Can I throw the stick today?" he shouted. JT waved him over. "Only if you think you can keep up with him." Nathan tossed the stick into the lake. Ranger sprinted into the shallows, not hesitating, not freezing. He swam with power, grabbed the stick, and paddled back, tail wagging proudly. JT watched, a hand resting on his chest. "You did it," he whispered. "You healed." Years passed. Ranger aged with grace. His muzzle grayed, his legs stiffened, but the fire never left his eyes. And when the day finally came, quiet and gentle, when he laid down by the lake and didn't rise again, JT didn't cry right away. He sat beside him, stroked his fur, and whispered, "You reached him, Ranger. You reached all of us." They buried him under the oak tree that shaded the shore. A plaque marked the spot. Ranger. He jumped into the lake, but what he reached was the heart of a nation. If this story inspired you, remember, loyalty, courage, and love live far beyond service. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this story with someone who believes that animals can be heroes too. Because Ranger didn't just save lives. He reminded us how to live,